Stop scrolling, because this isn't just a story. It's a moment the music industry would rather you forget. In the early hours of June 1st, 1991, a limousine pulled up outside a hospital in Philadelphia. A man inside was dying. The driver didn't stay, didn't explain, didn't come back. He vanished. And for nearly an hour, doctors fought to save a life they couldn't even identify. That man wasn't just anyone. He was David Ruffin, the voice that once defined an era, the voice behind hits that shaped generations, a star who stood at the top with the Temptations, now alone, unrecognized, and abandoned in his final moments. How does someone go from global fame to dying unnamed in a hospital room? Stay with this story, because what happened to him isn't just tragic. It exposes a darker truth about fame, loyalty, and what the industry does when the spotlight fades. David Eli Ruffin was born on January 18, 1941, in the tiny rural community of Wynot, Mississippi, 15 miles outside of Meridian. The name of the town sounds almost like a joke, but nothing about David's early life was funny. His mother, Ophelia, died during childbirth. He never knew her. He was raised by his father, Eli Ruffin, a strict Baptist minister who pushed his children hard in ways that shaped them and scarred them simultaneously. The family were sharecroppers, working other people's land in the deep American South during the years when Jim Crow still dictated the terms of black life in Mississippi. Poverty was not a backdrop for David's childhood. It was the entire landscape. The only escape from that landscape was music. David sang in his father's church before he could fully understand what the words meant. He performed in gospel groups as a child, opening for legendary acts like Mahalia Jackson and the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi. He encountered Elvis Presley, Little Richard, and Bobby Womack during his travels on the gospel circuit. By the time he was 13, he had already decided that his future was in music, not the ministry his father had planned for him. He left home, made his way to Memphis, Tennessee, sang in talent shows, and eventually joined a gospel group called the Dixie Nightingales. In the late 1950s, David followed his brother Jimmy to Detroit, Michigan, where the music industry was being rebuilt from the ground up by a man named Berry Gordy Jr. David was there early enough that he literally helped construct the building that became Hitsville, USA, the home of Motown Records. He recorded solo singles for smaller labels, made friends with a young Marvin Gaye, and kept looking for the right door. In 1964, that door opened. The Temptations needed a new tenor vocalist, and David Ruffin was chosen. He stepped into one of the most powerful groups in American music and transformed it overnight. Smokey Robinson looked at David and heard something that needed the right song built around it. A voice that could bellow and plead and ache and soar within the same 4 bars. He wrote My Girl specifically for David's voice, targeting the raspy tenderness at the center of his range. Recorded in November 1964 and released in early 1965, the song became the Temptations' first #1 single on the pop charts. It did not just make the group famous, it made David Ruffin a star. What followed was one of the most electrifying 4-year runs in Motown history. Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Beauty Is Only Skin Deep, I Know I'm Losing You, Since I Lost My Baby, I Wish It Would Rain. Hit after hit after hit, each one built on David's urgent, gospel-bred baritone that could carry more emotional weight in a single syllable than most singers could manage in an entire song. Marvin Gaye, who had one of the most celebrated voices in the world, listened to David and heard something he wished he had himself. That sentence alone defines what David Ruffin was capable of. But the fame was doing something to him that nobody around him wanted to fully address. The cocaine that had been part of the entertainment world's social fabric for years became something different for David. It became essential. His behavior became erratic. He began missing rehearsals and performances. He demanded the group be renamed David Ruffin and the Temptations, just as Diana Ross had been elevated above her group. He traveled separately from the other members in his own custom limousine with his trademark black-rimmed glasses painted on the door. He started showing up to concert venues unannounced and walking on stage mid-performance to take the microphone from his replacement's hands. In June 1968, David Ruffin was fired from the Temptations. He had been with them for 4 years. They were the 4 most successful years of his life. and the beginning of a fall that would take more than 2 decades to reach the bottom. The solo years started with genuine promise. My Whole World Ended entered the pop top 10 in 1969. Walk Away from Love reached number 9 in 1975 and sold over 1 million copies. There were moments when it seemed like David might be building something sustainable on his own, but every step forward was followed by 2 steps backward, and the cocaine addiction that had always been there was now running the show. Motown gave him minimal support once it became clear he was not going to replicate the Temptations' commercial numbers as a solo act. The 1980s were a relentless accumulation of disaster. He was jailed and fined for tax evasion in 1982 after failing to file a return for 1976. His house was foreclosed. He was arrested in 1986 for receiving and concealing a stolen handgun. In 1987, another cocaine possession arrest. In 1988, he was convicted of using cocaine and appeared before a judge who asked him about his financial situation. David Ruffin, the man who had once ridden in a mink-lined limousine through adoring crowds, told the judge he was penniless and living in a friend's mobile home outside Detroit. He was sentenced to probation and community service. He tested positive for opiates, violating his probation. He was sent to a drug treatment center. When he emerged in October 1989, he told reporters proudly, "I'm clean." He moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and began living with his girlfriend, Diane Showers. He reunited with former Temptations lead singers Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards, and they began touring together under the name Ruffin, Kendricks, Edwards, former leads of the Temptations. They performed with Hall & Oates at the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem and at the Live Aid concert in Philadelphia. They completed a successful month-long tour of England in the spring of 1991 that reportedly grossed nearly $300,000. A European tour was being planned. For a moment, at age 50, it genuinely seemed like David Ruffin was finding his way back. He had recently reached out to his brother, Quincy, and suggested they return to Mississippi together, walk along a lake with their feet in the sand. He wanted to get back to what life was really about. That phone call is one of the most heartbreaking details in the entire story. A man in his final weeks telling his brother he wanted to go home. On the evening of May 31st, 1991, David was in Philadelphia. He climbed into a gray stretch limousine borrowed from a friend named Linster Munt Butch Merle and was driven by a man named Donald Brown. They made their way to a property on 52nd Street near Columbia Avenue in West Philadelphia. Inside, David split 10 vials of crack cocaine with a man named William Noel. The cocaine was gone in under 30 minutes. And then, David Ruffin collapsed. Brown drove him unconscious to the emergency room of the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, told the staff what had happened and left him there on a gurney with no identification, no one at his side, $53 in his pockets, a borrowed limousine, an anonymous drop-off, and a disappearing act in the dark. The emergency room staff worked for nearly an hour, but the damage was too severe. At 3:55 in the morning on June 1st, 1991, David Eli Ruffin was pronounced dead. He was 50 years old. The official cause of death was accidental, an adverse reaction to cocaine. His body was initially tagged as John Doe. When his family learned what had happened, they believed immediately that something more sinister had occurred. David had reportedly been carrying a money belt containing up to $40,000 from the England tour. His body arrived at the hospital with $53. That money was never accounted for. The questions his family raised were never fully answered. His daughter, Cheryl Ruffin Robinson, spent decades afterwards saying that the media had torn her father's character down instead of treating his addiction as the disease it was. Thousands of people attended the funeral at New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit. The church was filled beyond capacity, spilling out into the streets with mourners who had come not just to say goodbye, but to witness the homegoing of a voice that had once defined a generation. Stevie Wonder performed, Aretha Franklin performed. The surviving Temptations were there, standing together again, not on a stage, but in grief. It was a moment where music, memory, and loss all collided under one roof.
Michael Jackson paid for the entire funeral out of his own pocket, a quiet gesture of respect from one legend to another. It was a final act of recognition for a man whose influence reached far beyond what history often remembers. David Ruffin, who died with just $53 in his pockets and a borrowed limousine as his final companion, was sent home to Detroit with the full ceremony of a legend. In death, he was given the dignity and honor that had so often eluded him in life. He is buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit, resting among other icons, his voice now part of history rather than airwaves. In 2019, the city of Detroit renamed a street near where he once lived David Ruffin Avenue, a permanent mark of remembrance in the place that shaped him. In Meridian, Mississippi, a section of road was officially named David Ruffin Boulevard. His hometown at last claimed him, not just as a son, but as a symbol of what he became. David Ruffin was ranked among the greatest singers in the history of American music by Rolling Stone magazine twice, in 2008 and again in 2023. His voice, raw, aching, unmistakable, helped to find the emotional core of soul music. But for the 32 years since his death, the story most people remember is not My Girl or Ain't Too Proud to Beg. It is the Bermuda shorts, the $53, the limousine that drove away without waiting. And maybe that is the tragedy of it all. Not that he was forgotten, but that his struggles became louder than his music. Because somewhere beneath those final headlines was still the voice that once stopped time, the voice that made the world feel something real. His daughter was right. They blamed the person instead of the disease. A boy from Why Not who became the voice of a generation deserved more than silence at the end. David Ruffin gave the world everything and left it with far less than he earned. If his story moved you, hit like to honor his legacy. Share this so more people remember his name, and subscribe for more Untold stories.